So it's my great pleasure to introduce to you, as you already know, James Whiteside, the CEO of AUSVEG, and Darren Keating, the CEO of PMA, who will be interviewed this morning by somebody whose voice you may have heard if you're a Victorian. Tonya Roberts is an experienced communication specialist who draws on her years of experience, especially in radio broadcasting with the ABC around Australia, and most recently on 774 in Melbourne, who will be facilitating and moderating this session. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please give them a warm round of applause and welcome them.
Well, thank you very much, Toby, and thank you, everybody, and good morning to you. Now, you, of course, know James and Darren and their titles, which were just given to you. You may not know how very new they both are to these particular roles. Darren, of course, as the CEO of the PMA, and James at AUSVEG are both, well, I'm going to say relatively new anyway, to their roles. And so this conference really comes at an ideal time for them to be quizzed a bit about their goals and about their outlook for their very separate but overlapping organisations. So I think we might start actually at that point. James, what do you think are perhaps the best things that could, well, that you at AUSVEG and that the PMA can, I suppose, encounter in these early stages of your professional marriage?
Well, I think that this conference, people have actually voted with their feet, and we've got a fabulous attendance, and I think an industry where people in the industry can see the whole value chain from producer through to consumer and actually understand how we can create value, eliminate waste, build profitability is really what the objective of the conference is about. And I think that's what the boards of PMA and AUSVEG were thinking when they took the decision to put the two conferences together. And I think by and large it's been widely applauded by everybody. So I think that's the idea. We've got this fabulous industry called horticulture. It's a complex industry. It's got lots of moving pieces, and getting everyone together to try and do those three things, eliminate waste, create value, and create profitability is really the name of the game.
And so does that mean that you think that the synergies are really obvious to everyone?
Oh, I'm sure they're obvious to some, and I think a bit of it is obvious to everybody. I think we're still trying to work out how to drive the convention itself and where the relationship between the two organisations will go. So I think it's work in progress.
And Darren, I'll put that same question about the synergies to you, because you see it from the other side of the coin.
Look, I mean, the simple numbers about the conference, we've got nearly 2,500 people here, we've got 80 odd speakers, 150 exhibitors in the trade display, and the level of positivity around the whole show has been fantastic. So what we set out to do, and look, I started just around the time that the two boards came together and decided to have a joint conference. And what I took out of it was the writing instructions were just to put on a bloody good show for industry. And I think we've done that, and I think, again, as James said, people have voted with their feet. The level of engagement and the discussion between industry, and there's a whole lot of people, when we looked at the two conferences to put them together, we did some analysis over who'd been going in the past, and we found there wasn't a great crossover in the delegates. So there was a small number, and probably a number of those people who had the crossover would say, look, it's really great you brought it together, it saved me going to two events. But one of the things that has happened, and I've been really conscious of and looking forward to seeing, is the people who may not have had a chance to bump into each other in the past having that chance. And so we're going to see discussions that may not have had a chance to happen. People seeing new ideas, different parts of the industry. That comment about seeing the whole supply chain, understanding where you fit, hearing the stories about other products, and the whole flow along rather than just your bit, is going to see so many opportunities come out of here that I don't know how we'll capture and measure that, but I'm really keen to hear those stories down the track of what people have gotten out of the event.
But it's interesting to hear that you clearly value, I suppose, what we might call corridor chat, although perhaps around here you'd call it highway chat. I mean, how are the distances between rooms around here? Everybody's Fitbit should be going off like a cracker.
I purposely didn't wear mine, but I know that one of the things we can say, it's a positive health kick for everyone in getting backwards and forwards to the room, but also that everyone's putting the time into getting around the trade show, to getting to the different events, to learning, to sharing ideas, to networking. I think those three things are really important parts of it. And we tick those off and it's all too easy to say, oh, it's a networking event, which means there's lots of social activities, which there are, and they're great. But this comes down to people talking to people, new ideas, new experiences. What'll come from it, I think, will be really cool, just to sit back and watch those, changes in people's businesses and lives and experiences afterwards.
All right, so the free plug is over now. Let's get a bit of context in relation to the purpose of this new relationship and this new way of doing the conference. Now, James, I know you feel that this is the most important issue to start with, that being the question of what business are you actually in?
Well, I think it's a fantastic question for horticulture and actually Australian agriculture. I mean, we've spent a lot of time focusing on the fantastic work that people are doing in differentiating their product, adding value, finding premium markets, trying to capture premiums, developing export capability, and I think that's all fabulous. But I think it's also, reflect on the other obligation I think Australian agriculture has, and that is around this notion of contributing to the task of feeding the world. And Jeff Kennett earlier this morning talked about the lack of a coherent national agri strategy, where we might, for example, set a goal of feeding 500 million or 1 billion people over the next 20 or 50 years. And so that, I think, is a different discussion. It's a discussion about cost competitiveness, how it is that we profitably produce nutritious food that allows lots of people in the world to eat it because it's affordable. Obviously, a function of hunger is an ability of people to afford food. So, to solve the world's food problem, we need to have affordable food. Growers also need to be profitable. So what is our role in establishing an industry which allows Australia, which is inherently a high-cost nation, to actually contribute to that broader social challenge that agriculture is trying to solve throughout the world? So we've got this dichotomy. We've got this fabulous premium first world marketing opportunity, and we've also got, I think, a social obligation and a commercial opportunity to actually produce good, nutritious food that the poorer people in the world can afford to buy. And so I think trying to understand, if we can solve for both of those things, I think we'll have a fabulous future.
And are you as much of a philosopher as that, Darren?
Perhaps not, but a little bit of a different angle on it. One of the things that I see is it's a challenge about, it's almost a health question, and it comes back to getting people eating more fruit and veggies. I look at my job, and one of the nice things is, and I've worked across a range of different bits of broadacre agriculture. For this role, one of my key activities is to work with our members and the industry to get people eating more fruit and veggies. Now, whether that's by helping them being a better marketer, having a better differentiated product, it can be things that give hooks to consumers. Again, whether it's about the product, the marketing, the story, however you do it. If we get people eating more fruit and veggies, twofold. That's a good thing for public and private health. In Australia, people are pretty good at eating their 2 pieces of fruit a day. About 50% of us are okay on that. When it comes to looking at the veg, though, and we're supposed to get our 5 serves of veg, we're absolutely rubbish at it. So Australia, about 7% of people manage to achieve that. Now,
Are you one of them?
No, I did the online test for the CSIRO and went through there and thought, I'm pretty good. I don't eat out that much. I cook at home. I'm conscious of it. Now with my role even more so about, right, we've got to do these things. But when you go through and do an honest self-assessment, you find yourself in a grumpy mood with the computer. So I didn't hit that number. It's a challenge that I've got. And based on the stats that we see time and time again, I'm guessing most of the audience here, and you two as well, are in the same boat there, probably finding some challenges. The good thing, though, is that overall, there are some small increases in that. And if you break out the opportunity that's there for industry, if we, this is real back of the envelope numbers, but if we say, let's say we see a 10% increase in the consumption, 10% of Australians pick up their game on fruit and veg and eat one more piece of fruit or one more serve of fruit and veg a day. Let's say that's about 300 grams. Let's say it's worth about $1. You start talking about things like $250 million a day. So the challenge we've got there, and I think which is to everyone here, both in this room and in the whole conference and the whole industry, is how can we all work better to get people eating more fruit and veggies? For 2 reasons. One, it's bloody good for business, and the opportunity there is huge. And can we actually do it? And I think all the tech parts of there's technology, there's training, all the opportunities we have to actually grow production are good. But the other one is that the benefit it'll have to the whole community, again, and to our public health system and all those things, is a fantastic one. So it's really nice to work in an industry where, again, at the end of the day, if you do your job, people eat more fruit and veggies, we're all healthy, we're all happier. It's a good thing.
Sounds like nirvana. Thinking back, though, to some of the points you raised, James, about your volume and the actual need of hungry people to eat, we arrive at quite a core question, don't we? Which I think is simply, is it better to make a lot of food or is it better to make lesser amounts of higher quality food?
Well, I think we need to do both. I mean, it's a big, complex industry, and I think we're capable of doing both things at once. So, because like any industry, you need to segment your market, and you need to understand how you can maximise on the opportunity that those market segments give you. So, I think there are some farmers that absolutely focus on, as I said, the value-adding, cutting-edge, differentiated markets, usually first world markets, and there are others who will just focus on being really good at growing lots and lots of nutritious food, which we can eat domestically and export, and is globally competitive. And I think that's, as I said before, that is the challenge in this country, where we have rising labour costs, rising energy costs, all those sorts of pressures, I think, really cobble the opportunities for the industry. And I think it's one of our responsibilities is to really try and help, to the extent that the government has a role, help them establish a framework which allows farmers to thrive in both sections of the market.
Okay, let's turn our attention to what the data on consumer trends is telling us. You've outlined what we all should be doing, which we do need to be reminded of. But domestically, overseas, eyes to Asia, eyes to the US. I mean, what sort of data should be uppermost in the minds of people here today, do you think, Darren?
I think it's about, so trends and data are two things in there, but the way people eat is changing. So the way they eat, where they eat, how they eat, and also how they're getting their groceries is really changing. And if you overlay that, all the information sources that we have, you touched on the activity tracker discussion a little bit earlier, and everyone has one of those or has used one, or certainly seen people that are. But we've got so many more sources of information that are coming in and having a play in how we go about making decisions. And food is a big one on that. You just look at how many people are taking snaps of their meals with Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Again, people in restaurants stopping to take a photo of their meal before they eat it. That's happening. But when you go back down through the chain there and say, right, what's driving that? It's a real interest in food. It goes back to the health aspects. There's so many different dietary trends and things that are going on.
And is much of it being purchased online? I mean, does anybody know how much is being purchased online?
There is, and look, it varies from market to market. But one of the challenges, and this was touched on by one of our speakers yesterday, Sean mentioned that people don't trust buying fruit and veg online because there's that thing about look and feel and touch. One thing I can say is that maybe that's right now, and probably in the Australian market, it's a challenge to get good produce online and get consistency. But a lot of overseas markets, we are seeing that happen more readily and be in a higher uptake, especially in Asia. There's a lot of, they've got population densities that allow, I suppose, more effort to going into actually producing it. And if you look at, again, it's a function of cost, market size, and actually accessibility. But you've got some very short delivery times. You've got very high quality services. The differentiation of product, and even getting down to using technology, so you can say, I'll deliver you of an orange with X bricks. Or you're talking about sweetness and you're talking about quality. So that's getting there. It's happening differently in different markets around the world. So what we see going on in North America versus Asia is quite different. I think Australia is just coming onto it. Look, Amazon Fresh is coming. Whether that will take over the market, I don't know how big its influence will be. I think it will help to change things. It's certainly, they've done it everywhere else they've gone around the world, but what it will actually do will be a question there. But one of the things is the amount of food that we're eating at home is diminishing. And if you look at a market like the US, they've got over 50% now of fruit and veg is going through food service sector. Now that's everything from quick service takeaway food through to hotels, restaurants, institutions. So it's a big spread there.
It's interesting, or sort of quirky in a way, isn't it, that there are these online trends emerging right alongside a solid sort of re-emergence, I suppose, of the farmers' market.
Well,
It's
again,
very much about the touch, the feel, the
absolutely,
taste,
and I mean it's a small part of the market, but
sure.
it absolutely goes to the fact that people are becoming more interested in the provenance of their food, more interested about the sustainability of the value chain that is delivering that food. They're becoming more inquisitive. And I think that's absolutely to be encouraged. I mean, we all bemoan the fact that children don't know where a litre of milk or an apple actually comes from. So the fact that people now in the cities are wanting to use things like farmers markets to engage with farmers and try and look back upstream, I think is something to be encouraged, although it comes with risk, because sometimes they see things they don't like and they start imposing pressures on us that we find uncomfortable. But I think, again, it's a fact of life that's going to happen, and we need to be in front of it and be ready for it, and actually embrace it.
And do you think it follows then, this interest level in food, that it follows that there is an appetite for personal nutritional research? I mean, do people actually want to know more, or are they very completely overloaded, really, with that sort of data? I mean, the Shopwell app, I think, is a thing now.
Look, there's a bunch of things out there, and from my personal perspective, it's a number of things that are very keen to tell me I should have less beer and bacon. And those things are out there, but one of the things we've got to remember is that people have been able to access, so the information that backs it up is not new. We've had dietitians, we've had medical experts providing health and nutrition advice for a hell of a long time. But now we're getting to the stage where it's in your phone, it's on your computer. The ways you can access that information is growing.
Yeah, but does any of that really change our discipline?
Well, yes and no, and I think it depends on, we've got to think about that none of us sitting here are in the generation that's coming through. We're not centennials, we're not millennials.
I hope we don't have any centennials here. I hope
well, there might be a couple. I saw a couple of prams. I saw a couple of prams getting around earlier. But people are changing the way they think about things, and I think it's about that. Access to information is much easier than it used to be, and people's desire to take it on. Now, again, Fitbits and activity trackers, everyone's got them. Whether they're probably not the be-all and end-all, and they don't change everything, but they'll influence it and they'll give you a nudge. And so a lot of these things, it's about choosing your own pathway through it. But the next steps that are in that space are you get DNA tests, you get tests of your gut flora, and you get more technical stuff. So it's actually coming down to a prescription of what you should and shouldn't eat.
The thing is, though, Darren, it's all telling us the same thing and what we already knew. So, I mean, I've got a hunch that Fitbit sales will peak and come off. Now, I'm a bit of a techno-Luddite, so I might be wrong, but I think actually the big advantage that our industry has is we make a great product. We've got this fabulous, noble product that is just good for people, and intrinsically people know that. So the challenge is, how do you actually make sure, to your point, that they eat more of it? And so it's not so much about keeping on telling them that fruit and veggies are good for them. It's actually finding a way in which they can easily incorporate them into their busy lives. And so the work we're doing to value add and deliver, cut pre-packed salads, so you can just buy a salad and it's got a bit of dressing in it and it's got everything in there, and you can eat it at your desk or when you're on the move or in the tractor. But I think those sorts of ways in which we can make the consumption of fruit and veggies more accessible and fun and enjoyable to eat is much more going to drive demand than continuing to remind people that, crack the whip, you've got to eat.
But it's not going to go away.
Well, people have different views, and I think there's different segments of the market.
Oh, no, look, the chopping it, slicing it, dicing it, cubing it, putting it in a pack, a box that arrives with all the ingredients and the recipe is fantastic, and that's one option. But these other tools of technology and the stuff we don't know about, the stuff that is coming, I think we've got to look at them all as they're tools in the toolkit that we can use. Now, again, I'm not going to be signing up for a DNA test to tell me whether I should eat more carrots or more broccoli. But there are people who will, and I think that the number of people who are looking to those things, looking to information, it's about, if we can as an industry find ways to promote the good ones and the ones that make sense, because there's a whole lot of really crazy advice on diet going around. It's one of the things in there. But again, I think generally, agree with you wholeheartedly on how do we find ways to make it easier for people to go about it, because people don't have the cooking skills they used to have.
From the producer's perspective, James, you mentioned the micro jazzy salads that are now available and are very alluring. What does that mean, do you think, for the level of change that farmers need to investigate, if not embrace? I mean, is it still okay to be a potato grower, or does everybody have to grow baby kale?
No, of course not. But I mean, every grower, every business, every individual needs to understand their place in the business, in the market that they're in. And so, it is tremendously important, I think, for farmers, whether they're growing a commodity or a differentiated product, that they understand what the consumer is thinking. And again, I think our challenge, Darren, is how do we get more farmers to come to this convention going forward? Because what a fantastic opportunity to talk to consumers and to actually understand what's happening. Because any business, anybody can't sit and work in isolation, and a lot of farmers do. It's a business that for many is an isolating activity, and so.
Well, it's almost
the challenge
the theme
is,
of the day.
I think the short answer is they have to change. They have to know what's happening in their marketplace.
Yeah, but it's interesting that word comes up again, the word isolation, because it was prominent in the last session, wasn't it, about mental health? So it's almost a bit of a thread through the day. But as a grower, if I were, I can totally imagine being sort of equally worried about the cost of change and embracing new stuff and about the cost of not changing. That's a tricky fence to sit on, isn't it?
Well, you have to make a commercial judgment, I
Yeah.
suppose, but you need to do that with the facts. So you need to go out there and get the facts and then make a decision what's right for your business.
Let's talk about the people in your industry, your members, both of your members. Relationships are always key. Do you think there's enough work going into them?
I think events like this are really good at helping to build relationships.
But this is a couple of days.
It is a couple of days. There's another 51 weeks of the year that we've got to keep working on it. Look, it's something that PMA does, that we try and find ways to bring people together and to build networks. Now, it's not all face-to-face, but if you're linking people up and helping that whole supply chain go through. And I think on top of the building the networks, it's also about bringing new people into industry. Because one of the key challenges we've got is making sure that the next generation of experts, of innovators, of leaders, that we're capturing them as an industry and grabbing them here. I mean, I studied rural science at the University of New England in Armidale and went through my whole class. No one worked in fresh produce. It was all cotton, wheat, cattle, sheep. And that missed opportunity in knowing what's going on in this industry is something that's become really apparent to me of late. I don't know, look, we've got a small group of students here through our Career Pathways program, but you know, that's a small number of students. And I think finding ways as an industry to grab a hold of new people and grab the smart young people, not just the science students, people with marketing, with marketing, food technology type stuff, things that go into, you know, the businesses that perhaps you don't think are a part of what we do, even hospitality, those things. It's saying, right, let's get hold of them early, let's get the brightest and best ones and get them in here.
I think
Recruitment, levels of education. Is it something that you give a lot of time or energy to? at this stage?
look, probably not enough. I think you know, the challenge to get new graduates into the industry, even you know, we have this we use this unfortunate word, unskilled labour, which is a word we need to come up with a better word. There's a challenge to come up with a better word than unskilled labour, because you know, recruiting people at all levels of the industry is difficult, and probably getting people to actually pick the fruit, work in the packing sheds, is one of the biggest problems that we face. And we use this word unskilled, and they're actually not unskilled, because by the time we're finished with them, we've absolutely got them very skilled, very proficient. Often it's a physical or technically complex task, and so whilst we may draw from a broad labour pool, I think we need to change some of the nomenclature would help our cause a little bit.
Well, perhaps you take a leaf out of the sort of big United Nations brand bucket and you've got developing rather than, because they're not developed,
Well,
that's what you're
there's
saying.
the first
It's
entrant in the
unskilled.
competition.
Thank you. That comment really leads us very neatly to labour markets. This phrase, or the phrase, I guess, that is tossed around a lot is chronic labour shortage. Is that how you see it for your industry, Darren?
I'd just stop and go a step back from that and say that one of the challenges we've got is that there are a number of people in industry who are choosing not to do the right thing when it comes to laws. Now, when it comes to laws around employment of staff in Australia, we have enough laws there about who you can and can't employ and who has the right to work in Australia, and also what the awards and conditions are. There's a number of businesses who choose not to follow that. They have a whole lot of reasons, and that's their own, that's their own set of decisions that they go through and make. However, I think as an industry, we need to do a better job of looking at the people who are doing the right thing and supporting them in a whole range of ways and promoting them, I think.
And what might be one of those ways that you support them?
Well, I think it's as simple as saying that you probably don't want to be doing business if you're in the supply chain and there are people, your partners in that supply chain who aren't doing the right thing as far as employing their staff in any way, shape or form. You need to really have a strong think about whether you want to keep doing business with them.
So a blacklist?
No, not a blacklist, because I think it's more about having a list of the good people in there. Work with people who want to do the right thing and share your values, because we've got the wider community is at a point of saying, that they're not okay with it. But also this is about simply following the law in a lot of the cases.
But there are growers tearing their hair out.
I think there's no question that we all need to obey the law. That's what the law is for. That's how functioning societies work. But I think there is a labour shortage. I think the discussion that we are having with government around importing labour and the change into the visa system is one that we need to prosecute much harder. There is this notion that for some reason it's un-Australian to get an overseas worker. The fact is, you ask everyone in the audience here, they would much sooner employ a local person who lives in the town and can actually join their workforce and be there for 5, 10, 20 years, but the labour force simply isn't there. So if we're going to pick the fruit, get the crop out of the ground, get the product through the packing sheds, we need to be able to have a reliable, available workforce that accommodates the peaks and troughs in demand. And the government needs to help us make sure that we can do that. And, you know, the decision in the budget the other day to impose another levy for applications for visas is this notion somehow that farmers are preferentially going overseas to find labour at the expense of domestic labour. It's just dumb. And we need to make sure that people understand that. So, yes, we need to comply with the law, but it's actually a much more broad issue around how it is that we actually get people into the paddock to do the work that needs to be done.
And so, do you think that AUSVEG is loud enough and is agile enough in its response to government on these sorts of things?
Oh, look, probably not. I mean, we're one voice. I think we could do a better job, and we're certainly, you know, we're talking in our organisation around trying to beef up the resources that we've got to the whole business of advocacy. Because
it's pretty funny when you're all vegetarian that you'd beef it up. But
anyway, sorry.
Maybe yes, Brussels sprout it up.
We could Brussels sprout it up, yeah. But we're not vegetarians.
No,
we just grow vegetables. But I think, you know, there's more work that we can do.
It's a whole industry challenge though, because there's no one person in industry who's going to fix this. And again, I think it's a big challenge that everyone needs to look at. And even if you go back to it, that there's so many Australians, so many of our kids head off overseas and travel the world and get jobs overseas. And we've got to think about how would we want them to be treated over there. And if we can't get our own act together, because again, there are people who are consciously doing this, and there are people who are consciously employing people they shouldn't be, and also even to the point of just saying, "Well, I turned a blind eye, so therefore it's okay." And that's something that I think has been allowed to go on, and we've got to, you know, by investing in a number of ways, and it's getting more access to visas, technology going forward, and finding ways that we can, you know, remove some of the people out of the system if we can. Which I don't think it's going to take jobs away. I think it's going to change the jobs. You know, right now over in the States, I've seen some automated strawberry pickers, which are actually coming along pretty well. They're not going to be here tomorrow, but they're getting there. They're getting there, and people are setting up apple orchards towards being automated picking. I've seen some articles recently about even automated asparagus pickers. So we're getting there. The technological solutions can be part of it, but for here and now, again, finding ways to legally get the staff in the paddock is a very important thing.
Oh no, I think you're absolutely right. And technology is the key. And you know, the long-term answer to our chronic labour shortage is actually, I mean, people don't want to do the work because it's hard work. And so, if we can find ways to mechanise, we can take away that demand for labour, and we can actually again drive down our cost, increase our productivity, which is absolutely what we need to do.
It's almost a challenge to the whole industry, because the first impression that a lot of people get of horticulture as an industry in fresh produce comes back to having a job when you're at uni. And you know, I mean, personally, I picked spugs for a couple of weeks at one of my uncles, and geez, I studied hard after that. I'm not built for picking things up off the ground, but it is in there. And I think as a bigger picture, we've got to remember that the public image that people see about fresh produce and the way they're seeing we're portrayed in the media, often it's really easy to get a negative story there, but a positive one's hard. So we see this story.
Well, a narrow positive one's easy, because a lot of the media stories are, you know, whoop-de-doo, brand new microgreens.
Exactly.
And that's glamour.
It's there and it's gone. But if you look, I mean, the media has put a focus on the illegal immigrant worker. And if you're someone who's coming out of uni thinking, what will I do with my life? And you've seen these stories in the media about bad things in a certain industry, it may deter you from coming to the industry. So again, it's a really big issue, really big challenge.
So in summary, in conclusion, can you give me 3 or 4 words that you think sum up the mood of the industry at the moment, James?
Oh, look, I think there's a tremendous mood of opportunity and collaboration. I mean, horticulture is the second biggest agricultural industry in the country after beef, but it is tremendously fragmented. We've got 30-odd peak industry bodies, for example, all trying to get a voice, all trying to get their message across, and actually, when you talk to them about what their issues are or our issues are, they're all the same. And so how do we get collaboration, people wanting to work together and actually put resources and get some critical mass so that we can really tackle the common, may not be every issue, but the critical common issues that we have. So I think if we can do one thing, and if Hort Connections can be a catalyst to do one thing, it's actually to get our disparate industry to be more collaborative. I think that's the single biggest opportunity we have.
The level of creativity, of innovation, you comfortable with that, Darren?
Oh, we can never be complacent about the level of that that's going on. But I think if you look through the trade show and our list of speakers we've had over the past couple of days, I mean, over 80 odd speakers, we might have overcooked the speaking list there, but if you can't find something you're interested in at this conference, you haven't tried. But just the array of things that people are investigating and challenging themselves with, even the small chunk we've seen out of this conference is fantastic. So I think, again, it comes back to the opportunity, and everyone in the industry has that opportunity to find their own way to innovate and grow and continue to do what they do well and to go that next step on.
Well, thank you, both of you, for sharing your thoughts here today. I know you're going to welcome the opportunity to have further discussions. I know you've had a lot already, but even further discussions with your members and your colleagues throughout the remainder of the conference. Thanks, James. Thanks, Darren.
Thanks, Tonya.